Hey, you're listening to Hexes, Haunts, and Howls. I'm Cupcake. This is our very first episode, the beginning of something dark, quiet, and a little unsettling. So wherever you are, get comfortable, lower the lights, let the noises around you fade into the background, or maybe notice them a little more than usual. The stories shared here are meant to feel personal, like something whispered instead of read, like a secret you're not sure you're meant to hear. For now, you're safe, but that feeling might not last. Christmas Eve is supposed to be safe. It's supposed to be lights glowing through frosted windows, the smell of pine, families inside, doors locked, the world quiet. But for some people, Christmas Eve is when everything went wrong. Tonight's episode contains 3 listener-submitted accounts. Each one comes from someone who says they were never the same afterward. They don't tell these stories for fun. They tell them because not telling them feels worse. Listener discretion is advised. Story 1. The Hex That Fouled Me Home. I need to be clear about something before I start. I didn't believe in curses, I didn't believe in witches, and I absolutely did not believe that words, symbols, or rituals could reach into your life and rot it from the inside out. I believed in coincidence, and stress, and people reading meaning into chaos because the alternative was scarier. That sometimes terrible things just happen, and that human brains hate a mystery it can't solve. That belief made me feel safe. It let me sleep at night. It let me laugh when older relatives whispered warnings under their breath, when they refused to explain certain traditions, when they crossed themselves at odd moments or stopped mid-sentence like they'd said too much. I thought fear was learned. I thought superstition was inherited, like bad posture or outdated recipes. I was wrong. That changed on Christmas Eve, December 24th, 2016. I remember the year because it was the last year my family felt normal. The last Christmas, everything splintered into before and after. Before the phone calls that came too late, before the empty chairs, before the things no one says out loud anymore. The house was full that night, too full. Coats piled on the bed, shoes scattered by the door, the air thick with food and noise overlapping conversations. Laughter bounced off the walls, forced but genuine enough to pass. Christmas music played softly from a radio in the kitchen, the same station my mother always tuned to out of habit. Outside, the snow hadn't started yet, but the sky was low and heavy, pressed flat and gray, like it was waiting for permission to fall. Inside, the heat was turned up too high, windows fogged, wine flowed, old arguments were carefully avoided, new ones hadn't started yet. If you'd walked in then, you would have seen a family on the surface, intact, functioning, familiar. What you wouldn't have noticed was how my grandma refused to sit with her back to the windows, or how she flinched when someone mentioned walking the dog after dark. Or just how after sunset she paused in the hallway and traced a symbol on the doorframe with her thumb. Something subtle enough that no one else seemed to catch. At the time, I didn't ask. I didn't think it mattered. I didn't know that some things don't need belief to work. They just need an invitation. I was working late at a women's clothing boutique tucked in a dying strip mall, the kind with flickering signage, half-empty storefronts, and a nail salon that never seems to close no matter how bad the weather got. Snow had been falling since noon, not blowing, not drifting, just dropping straight down in thick, quiet sheets, the kind that absorbs sound until the world feels padded and unreal. By the time we locked up, the parking lot looked abandoned. No tire tracks, no footprints except our own. Just smooth white drifts and sickly yellow glow of overhead lights buzzing and popping like insects trapped in glass. The kind of quiet that makes you aware of your own breathing. That's when I saw her. She was standing beside my car. Not touching it, not breaking into it, just standing there, perfectly still, as if she'd been placed. My first thought wasn't danger. It was confusion. Employees didn't linger. Customers didn't wait around after closing. And she hadn't left any footprints leading up to my car. The snow beneath her boots looked untouched. She looked wrong in a way I still struggle to explain. Her clothes were old-fashioned, long, dark skirt, heavy wool coat buttoned all the way to the throat, but they were too clean. No fraying, no stains, no sign of wear, like she had stepped out of a photograph instead of a thrift store. Her hair was jet black, braided tightly down her back, pulled so neat it made my scalp ache just looking at it. At the end of the braid, it was tied with a red thread. Not ribbon. Thread. When my boots crunched in the snow, she turned. Her eyes caught the parking lot lights and reflected them wrong. Too much shine, too much depth. They weren't watery, they were wet, like something freshly exposed. That's when she said my name, perfectly, casually, like we'd met before. My body locked up before my mind caught up, heart racing, fingers numb inside my gloves. I remembered the absurd detail of my keys digging into my palm because I hadn't realized I'd clenched my fist. I'd never seen her before. I asked how she knew my name. My voice sounded thin, embarrassed even, like I was the one being rude. She smiled, not wide, not cruel, just enough to show she was pleased. You left something of yourself, she said, where you shouldn't have. I laughed nervously, the wrong reaction, but the only one I had. I told her she needed to step away from my car. I said it like I was in charge, like this was a normal situation. That's when she reached into her coat, slowly, deliberately. She pulled out a small cloth bundle, folded carefully and tied with, again, the same red thread. The fabric looked old, stained, darker in places like it had absorbed something that couldn't be released. She loosened it just enough for me to see inside. Hair, teeth, and something dark and shriveled that might have been meat, or might have been something that used to be alive. The smell hit a second later, metallic, sweet, wrong. She closed the bundle and pressed it towards me. This is yours now. I told her to stop messing with me. Told her I didn't think this was funny. I remember backing up and bumping into my car, the cold metal biting through my coat. That's when her voice changed, dropped, flattened, lost whatever softness it had been pretending to carry. You mocked what feeds on pain, she said. You mocked me. And then it clicked. 3 weeks earlier, a woman like her had come into the store. Same posture, same eyes. She'd asked about a specific necklace, bone and iron, handmade, something our manager kept behind the counter because customers liked to steal it. I remember joking with my coworker after she left, calling her a Halloween prop, laughing too loud, rolling my eyes. She was that woman. She stepped closer. The snow didn't move beneath her feet. I don't hex people lightly, she said. Blood witches don't waste themselves. She pressed the bundle into my hands. Her fingers were warm, not just warm, alive, pulsing faintly, like something under her skin was moving on its own. This ends when you do. Then she turned and walked into the snow, and vanished. Not faded, not walked out of sight, gone, between two parked cars that hadn't been there seconds earlier. I threw the bundle away immediately, dumped her behind the store, didn't look back, didn't check if it landed at the bottom. I went home, locked my doors, pulled my curtains, tried to laugh it off like a bad prank that went too far. At exactly 12:01 a.m., Christmas Day, every light in my apartment turned off at once. Not the power, just the lights. I stood there in the dark, heart hammering, waiting for them to hum back. it didn't. I started bleeding that night. Not from an injury, from my gums, my nose, my ears. Over the next year, my dog refused to sleep in the bedroom, whining and scratching at the door if I tried to force him inside. I dreamed of red thread tightening around my throat, pulling me upright while something braided it tighter. I woke up with bruises shaped like fingerprints, thumbs pressing deep, deliberate. Every mirror in my apartment cracked straight down the center, one by one, no matter where I moved them. Doctors found nothing wrong. Blood work was, quote-unquote, normal. Stress, they said, anxiety, dry air. On Christmas Eve the following year, I found the bundle again, on my pillow. Same red thread, same smell. I moved, changed jobs, changed numbers, changed cities. It still finds me every December 24th. And I'm sending this story because this year, the thread is tighter. Story number 2. It stood outside our camp on Christmas Eve. I want to start by saying that I didn't know what a dog man was when this happened. I didn't have a name for it. I still don't like using that word. It feels too clean, too internet made. But it's the closest thing I've found to what matches what we've experienced. This happened on Christmas Eve, 2019, in northern Wisconsin. My wife and I had a tradition of winter camping. Nothing extreme, one night only. Close to the truck, good gear, redundancy for everything. We weren't reckless people. We planned, we layered, we checked forecasts twice. We liked the quiet more than the challenge. No crowds, no engines, no voices carrying through the trees. Just snow and the campfire. That year, we chose a primitive site near a frozen river. We'd camped there once before in the summer. A small clearing surrounded by spruce and pine, the river cutting a dark line through the woods about 50 yards downslope. The forecast called for clear skies and bitter cold, around 5 degrees overnight, manageable, normal for us. We arrived just before dark, parked off a forestry road, and walked our gear about 100 yards in. The snow was deep but firm. The kind that squeaks under your boots when it's cold enough. The first thing that felt wrong was the snow. It wasn't untouched, not in a normal way. There was no trails, no tracks, no sign of people or animals moving through it. But scattered around in clearing were places where the snow was packed down into large, uneven ovals. Depressions too big to be from kneeling, too irregular to be stumps or fallen branches buried underneath. They looked like standing spots, as if something heavy had stood there for a long time, shifted its weight, and stood again. I remember joking that maybe hunters had used the area earlier in the season, maybe someone had set up a blind. My wife didn't laugh. She crouched near one of the depressions and pressed her glove into it. The snow was hard as concrete. "Whatever did this," she said quietly, "wasn't just walking through." That should have been our sign to leave. Instead, we kept going. We set up camp fast. Muscle memory took over. Tent first, stakes driven deep, fire pit cleared down to dirt. As soon as the sun dipped below the trees, the temperature dropped hard. Not gradually, it fell. The cold felt aggressive, like it pushed inward instead of settling around us. By 7 p.m., we were sitting shoulder to shoulder near the fire, eating freeze-dried meals straight from the bags. We barely talked. Every word felt too loud. The woods were wrong. No wind, no shifting branches, no distant animal movement. Even the usual creaks and pops you hear as trees contract in the cold were absent. It felt like the forest had been unplugged. Around 8:30, my wife leaned closer to me and said, almost casually, "Do you hear breathing?" I told her no. And then I did. At first, it sounded like the wind moving through a narrow space. But there was no wind. The sound had rhythm. Depth. Control. Slow inhale. Slower exhale. Not close enough to feel, but close enough to place. Somewhere just beyond the tree line, in the dark. Too slow for extortion, too steady for an animal that had just moved. I stood up and turned my headlamp toward the sound. The beam cut through the falling embers and into the trees. Nothing reflected back. No eyes, no movement, no shape. The breathing stopped immediately. Not faded, stopped. Like whatever was doing it had been waiting to see if we noticed. We told ourselves it was the sound traveling strangely in the cold. Snow does that. Woods do that. Fear fills in gaps. We sat back down. That's when something shifted behind us. Not footsteps, weight. The snow didn't crunch, it compressed. A low, dense sound, like pressure being reapplied, like something heavy changing how it stood. I turned slowly, already knowing I didn't want to see what was there. At the edge of the firelight, just beyond where the light died, something stood. I couldn't place its full shape. Firelight flickers, shadows stretch, but the outline was wrong. Too tall, too broad. The shoulders were high, higher than any bear on all fours, but the mass was narrow enough that it didn't fit a bear standing upright either. It didn't move, didn't step forward, didn't step back. It stood there like it had always been there, like we were the ones who had just arrived. My wife whispered, "Don't run." I don't know how she knew to say that. She's never seen anything like this before. But her voice wasn't panicked. It was instinctual, like something older than the thought itself. That's when the smell reached us. Wet fur, cold iron, and something sour underneath, like rot just barely in check by the cold. My throat tightened, my eyes burned. I raised my headlamp again. This time, the beam caught its face. It wasn't fully canine. The snout was short and broad. The eyes were forward-facing, set too close together, reflecting a light with a dull, amber sheen. Its mouth was closed, but the lips were pulled back just enough to expose teeth. Thick, uneven, not shaped like anything that belonged in a dog's jaw. It blinked, slowly, deliberately. Then it leaned forward. Not aggressively, not to charge. Like it was studying us. Like we were the unfamiliar objects it hadn't decided what to do with yet. My wife started shaking uncontrollably. I could hear her breathing, hitching, low, shallow, and fast. I felt it too. The deep, vibrating certainty that we were being assessed. I spoke without thinking. "We're leaving," I said. "We're packing up." The thing tilted its head. The fire popped loudly, sending sparks spiraling upward into the dark. For a split second, I thought that was it. That sound would trigger something ancient, something automatic. Instead, it stepped back. One step, then another, never turning away, never breaking eye contact. When it reached the trees, it lowered itself, not fully, but enough that the outline changed again, becoming wider, closer to the ground. Then it moved sideways into the darkness, fluid and silent, and then vanished. We didn't wait. We grabbed what we could carry, keys, headlamps, the emergency bag, and left everything else behind. The tent, the packs, the food. The fire died on its own behind us. The walk back to the truck felt endless. Every shadow felt occupied. Every tree looked like it might step forward. We heard nothing behind us. That was worse than hearing something follow. When we reached the road, I turned back one last time. At the edge of the clearing, something stood, watching us leave. Lower now. Still. We didn't report it. We didn't tell friends. Saying it out loud felt like we were inviting questions that we couldn't answer. 2 days later, in daylight, we went back to retrieve our gear. Around the fire pit, we found prints. Large, deep. Not paws, not boots. Something in between. We don't camp in the winter anymore. And we don't stay out after dark in places that feel patient. Story number 3. The extra footprints. I lost my father 2 days before Christmas in 2019. The timing felt cruel in a way I still don't have words for. Grief folded into a season that's already heavy with memory. The house was full of people and food and murmured condolences, but everything felt distant, muffled, like I was underwater. I slept in short, useless bursts. Every room held something that belonged to him. The night after the funeral, I couldn't breathe in the house anymore, so I went for a walk. Fresh snow had fallen earlier that evening, soft and clean, the kind that smooths the world into something simpler. No wind, no falling flakes, just a white skin sketched tight over the ground. The cold bit at my face, sharp and honest. It felt better than the air inside. I followed a familiar trail near our house, one I'd walked 100 times growing up. The snow recorded everything. Each step I took stayed exactly where I left it. Deep, crisp impressions, the edges still sharp. I remember thinking how strange it was to see proof that I was still moving, still here. After a while, I looked down again. That's when I noticed the second set of footprints. They hadn't crossed the trail. They hadn't come from the trees. They were just there. Same size as mine, same tread pattern, same stride length, matching me step for step. Not ahead, not behind. Beside me. My chest tightened, but I told myself it had to be old tracks that I hadn't noticed before, or someone walking earlier whose steps happened to line up with mine. The brain will build excuses fast when the alternatives feel too sharp to touch. I slowed down. The second set slowed down too. I stopped completely. They stopped. The silence pressed in. I could hear my own breathing, loud and uneven. I didn't want to look down again, but I did anyway, just to confirm I wasn't imagining it. 2 sets of prints, side by side, perfectly aligned. A cold, hollow feeling spread through my stomach, sinking lower with every second I stood there. I told myself not to panic, that grief does things to perception, that the mind looks for company when it's alone for too long. I turned around. My footprints turned with me. The other set did not. They kept going straight. One set of footprints, identical to mine, continued down the trail and off into the trees, each step clean and confident, as if whoever made them knew exactly where they were going. I stood there for a long time staring, waiting for them to stop, waiting for them to turn back. They didn't. They disappeared between the trunks, swallowed by shadow, leaving the trail empty, except for my own steps facing the wrong direction. I went home without finishing the walk. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't need them to explain it away. Some things feel too personal for witnesses. I never followed those footprints, but every winter since, I find them again. Not always in the same place, not always on the same trail. Sometimes they appear beside me for a few steps before peeling away. Sometimes I see a single set ahead of me, the same size, the same stride, leading somewhere I don't remember deciding where to go. They never approach me. They never cross my path. They just walk, like they're keeping pace with a life that split from mine and kept moving. I've learned to stop when I see them, to turn back, because I don't know where they're headed. And I don't know what would happen if one winter I decide to follow. Story number 4. We left milk for Krampus. I grew up in a German-American household where Krampus wasn't a joke. He wasn't a costume stitched together for parades or postcards. He wasn't something you laughed at after too much eggnog. He was a warning. Every Christmas Eve, without fail, my grandmother would take a chipped ceramic bowl from the back of the cabinet, the one that never held anything else, and set it in the back steps just before nightfall. Not cookies, not sweets, not anything meant for children. Warm milk steamed until it fogged the windows, mixed with something dark. I never saw exactly what she added. A powder, maybe? Crushed herbs? Ash scraped from the stove? The milk always turned cloudy and gray, streaked with darker veins that swirled like bruises beneath the surface. She called it the offering. She never explained what it was for, only what would happen without it. If we don't leave it, she told us, her voice low and flat, Krampus will check anyway. Not might, not could, will. When she said his name, she didn't look at us. She looked towards the woods behind the house, where the trees pressed together too tightly and the snow always seemed deeper than it should have been. She said Krampus didn't come for everyone. Only the curious, only the defiant, only the ones who needed to be reminded why traditions existed. When I was 10, my older cousin decided he was done being afraid. He was 16, tall, loud, already halfway convinced he knew better than the rest of us. He rolled his eyes when my grandma prepared the bowl that year, scuffing like the whole thing embarrassed him. "It's fake," he whispered to me while she wasn't looking. "Old country scare tactics. There's no Krampus, just stories to keep kids in line." He grinned, sharp and confident, the kind of grin that made you want to believe him. That year, when my grandmother went to bed early, tired, coughing, trusting, we didn't leave the bowl. The back steps stayed bare. The snow started around dusk. Not gently, not prettily. It came down thick and heavy, flakes clumping together, swallowing sound as they fell. By nightfall, the world outside the window looked padded, smothered, like it had been wrapped in cotton to keep it from screaming. The woods disappeared first, tree by tree, shape by shape, until all that remained was a dark wall beyond the yard, solid, watching, too close. No wind moved the branches, no animals stirred. Even the usual night noises had gone quiet, as if the forest had decided to hold its breath. Inside, the house felt smaller. The walls popped softly as the temperature dropped. The old clock ticked louder than it had ever, each second dragging out longer than the last. I remember realizing, suddenly, irrationally, that I could hear everything. Then I noticed the smell. Worm milk. Faint, sour yet sweet. Wrong. My cousin laughed it off when I mentioned it, told me I was imagining things, told me to grow up. But when I looked towards the back door, I saw something that made my stomach turn cold. Footprints. Not leading away, leading toward the house. Deep impressions pressed into the fresh snow, spaced too far apart, sinking lower than boots ever should. They stopped just short of the steps, and then vanished, as if whatever made them had lifted straight up into the air. That was when the scraping started. Slow, heavy, patient. Somewhere deep in the woods, something answered with the sound of chains being dragged through snow. By 10 p.m., the woods behind our house were making sounds I'd never heard before. Not the usual sounds you learn to ignore when you grow up near trees. No owls calling, no insects chirring, no distant rustle of deer moving through the brush. Those all had gone quiet, as if the forest itself was listening. What replaced them didn't belong there. Chains. Not rattling loosely, not swinging freely, but dragging. Slow, heavy, purposeful. Each pull ended with a dull clink, followed by the sound of metal scraping against bark. The noise traveled unevenly, sometimes closer, sometimes further away, like whatever was making it wasn't walking in a straight line, or wasn't entirely sure where it was going. Every scrape made my teeth ache. The trees reacted to it. I could hear bark being pulled back, the sharp sound of wet, followed by a low groan as trunks shifted under pressure they were never meant to bear. Leaves shook even though there was no wind. Branches trembled like something massive was passing too close, brushing against them without care. Inside the house, no one spoke at first. Then my grandma stood up. She didn't look toward the window. She didn't ask what the sound was. Her face had gone tight in a way I'd only ever seen once before, at a funeral. She crossed herself slowly, deliberately, as if rushing would invite attention. And then she started praying in German. Not softly, not for comfort. It was urgent, clipped, breathless, the words trembling over each other like she was trying to build a wall out of sound. Her voice shook, not from fear exactly, but from recognition, from knowing something she hadn't wanted to remember. I caught fragments I didn't understand. Old words, harsh syllables, names spoken carefully like they were dangerous if said wrong. Each time the change dragged closer, she raised her voice, pressing the prayer harder into the air, daring it to listen. The metal scraped again, closer this time. The house creaked in response, wood popping along the walls, the floorboards tightening beneath our feet. Somewhere outside, something heavy shifted its weight, and the chains went still, not fading away, not retreating, waiting. And that was worse than the sound itself. At 11:30, the power went out. Not all at once, not cleanly. The lights flickered first, a nervous stutter, like the house itself was reconsidering whether to stay awake. The lamp by the couch dimmed, brightened, then died. The refrigerator stopped its low, comforting hum. The clock on the microwave blinked once and went black, taking time with it. The silence that followed felt wrong, too sudden, too complete. Outside, the wind kept moving through the trees, but it sounded further away now, muffled, as if the world beyond the walls had taken a step back. The house creaked in places it never had before, settling into the dark like it was learning a new shape. By 11:35, my phone had become the only source of light. The glow felt thin and fragile. I checked for a signal. 1 bar, then none. No service, no weather alerts, nothing to explain why the outage felt so deliberate. At 11:40, I noticed how cold it was getting. The heater hadn't just shut off, it had given up. The air felt heavier, pressing against my skin. Every breath fogged faintly, though it wasn't cold enough for that. Not yet. At 11:45, the dog lifted its head. Not barking, not growling, just listening. Its ears were rigid, eyes fixed on the hallway that led to the back of the house. The part of the house that never quite felt finished. I whispered its name. It didn't react. When I followed its gaze, I felt it too. A pressure, like someone standing just out of sight, close enough to hear me breathe. At 8:50, the sounds began. Soft at first, so soft I thought it was from the house settling again. A faint scrape. Then another. Not rhythmic, not random either. Like something testing the ground, dragging lightly, stopping when I paid attention. I checked the back door. Locked. The deadbolt solid. The curtains unmoved. The glass reflecting my own face back at me, pale and unsure. At 11:55, my battery dropped from 38 to 12% in seconds. No apps running, no exclamation. The screen dimmed on its own, like it was tired too. I plugged it into a power bank that should have been full. It wasn't. The phone buzzed once, weakly, then stopped charging altogether. At 11:58, the dog finally growled. Low, quiet, directed. At 11:59, the wind outside stopped completely. No trees, no insects, no distant highway noise, just the house holding its breath. Then the clock I couldn't see anymore would have turned over. At midnight, something knocked on the back door. Not a knock, a collision. The back door buckled inward with a sound like a rib snapping. Wood groaned, hinges screamed, and dust shifted from the door frame as if the house itself had flinched. Whatever hit it had weight. Not the careless weight of a falling tree, but the forced focus of something thrown, or launched. The impact echoed through the walls and into our bones. Before anyone could scream, it moved. Footsteps, no, impacts, thudded across the roof. Slow, heavy. Every step pressed down hard enough to make the ceiling beams complain. The sound traveled from one end of the house to the other, deliberate, testing. Then came the scrape. Hooves. The unmistakable grind of keratin against shingles. A dragging sound like whatever was up there wasn't fully lifting its feet, or didn't care if it damaged the house beneath it. Bits of grit and old roofing slid down into the gutters. Something snorted, wet and close, breath huffing through flared nostrils. We huddled in the living room, pressed shoulder to shoulder, the lights long gone. The only glow came from the fireplace, flames shaking like they were afraid too. Above us, the thing moved back and forth, slow and methodical, as if counting rooms, as if learning the layout. Each step paused directly overhead, listening. Then the chimney rattled. Soot sifted down in a thin black curve, dusting the hearth and the rug like filthy snow. The metal dappers screeched as it pulled aside from above, forced open with something that didn't belong in a human hand. Something came down the chimney. Not all the way, just enough. A shape passed through the darkness, shoulders wedging against brick. Charred horns curved forward, blackened and cracked like burnt roots. Ash clung to its coarse, matted fur. Then its face emerged, smeared with soot and old residue, eyes glowing thick and amber, like sap burning from the inside of a tree. Its tongue slid out first, too long, too flexible, wet and dark, tasting the air in slow, savoring motions. It inhaled deeply, nostrils flaring, drawing scent from the room, fear, sweat, smoke, blood. And then it spoke. My cousin's name. It didn't say it loudly. It caressed it. The voice sounded swollen, ruined, like it had just seeped in blood and rusted iron, dragged through a throat that had never learned how to speak like a man. Every syllable stuck, wet and thick, vibrating through the chimney and into our chests. My cousin whimpered. That's when my grandma screamed. She snatched the bowl from the mantel, the one she prepared without explanation hours earlier. Milk cloudy with something darker floating in it. Herbs, salt, ash. She hurled it into the fire with the force that surprised everyone. The flames exploded upward. The thing recoiled instantly, shrieking, a sound so sharp that it was like glass inside my ears. Smoke blasted back up the chimney as it scraped away, claws gouging deep furrows into the brick. The mark smoked faintly, etched too deep to be natural, too wide to belong to any animal we knew. And then it was gone. The roof groaned once more, hooves scraped, then silence. My cousin disappeared 2 weeks later. They said he ran away, said teenagers do that sometimes. But they found his boots at the edge of the woods behind our house, placed neatly side by side like an offering. No tracks leading away, no sign of struggle, just the boots. Every Christmas Eve since, we leave the bowl. No one questions it, no one forgets. And every year, when morning comes, the snow outside our house is disturbed. Hoof prints. Deep, heavy, patient. Circling, waiting. If you've experienced something you can't explain, we want to hear from you. Listener submissions can be sent anonymously. Always remember, the cold doesn't just take heat, sometimes it takes notice. Thank you for listening to the first episode of Hexes, Haunts, and Howls. I'm Cupcake, and until we meet again, stay sweet.